to my presentation about the poem If We Must Die, which was written by Claude McKay in the year 1919. Let's move forward to the structure of my presentation. Firstly, I will read out aloud the poem. After, I will shortly summarize it for you. Then I will analyze certain aspects. Firstly, the subject matter. And in order to underline the subject matter, I will illustrate repeated concepts. Secondly, I will analyze the tone and the mood of the speaker. Thirdly, I will illustrate the poetic form. Fourthly, the language and imagery will be analyzed. Fifthly, I will give some information about the historical background. In the next step, I will connect my findings to a central meaning. In the last step, I will explain the relevance of the poem for, firstly, me personally, and secondly, generally for today. In the following, I will read the poem out aloud for you. If we must die, let it not be like hawks, hunted and penned in an inglorious spot, while round us bark the mad and hungry dogs, making them mock at our cursed lot. If we must die, or let us nobly die, so that our precious blood may not be shed in vain, then even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us though dead. O kinsmen, we must meet the common foe, though foul numbered, let us show us brave, and for their 1,000 blows, dear one death blow. What though before us lies the open grave? Like men, we will face the murderous cowardly pack, pressed to the wall, dying but fighting back. Let's move on to the summary. In the first stanza, the lyrical persona appears to not die like a weak animal, which is humiliated and hunted into an unfavorable place. In the second stanza, the lyrical persona suggests dying honorably in order to give their lives a purpose, so that the hated enemy who they resist against is forced to honor them even after death. In the third stanza, the lyrical persona requests its relatives to fight courageously, although they are far outnumbered and the resistance appears to be suicide. Furthermore, the immense attacks of the enemy will be severely and deadly punished. In the last stanza, the lyrical persona conveys that they will bravely fight back against the evil and coward enemy. The analysis of the subject matter. As you can see in the title, If We Must Die, as well as in the repeated concepts, which I will explain on the next page, and the content of the poem, which is basically a deadly conflict between the evil enemy and the devastated group, including the lyrical persona, the poem suggests oppressed people to resist honorably their oppressors, even if the resistance is deadly. Let's move forward to the symbolism. In the poem there are three mainly repeated concepts, which are death, honor, and of course injustice. In order to prove my assumption, I picked several quotes which deal with these concepts. In conclusion of the symbolism, the poem outlines that the deadly resistance is necessary in order to preserve honor and combat injustice. The analysis of the lyrical persona. The tone in the poem is really dramatic and exciting. This quote, for example, pressed to the wall, dying but fighting back, clarifies that. The mood. The mood of the lyrical persona is rather serious, unfearful, but also determined. The quote, let us show us brave, as well as we must meet the common foe, clarify that. The form of address. The lyrical persona addresses a certain group, specifically its relatives. It uses plural first-person pronouns like we, us, and our, which proves that. Moreover, it addresses them with O kinsmen, which means relatives. Firstly, in order to express compassion for the common suffering, and secondly, in order to motivate them. Besides, it frequently uses apostrophes. Therefore, it not only addresses its relatives, but also appeals to them. In conclusion of the tone, mood, and address, the determined and serious lyrical persona generates a dramatic insight of the devastating feelings of oppressed people and encourages them for resistance by directly addressing them. The analysis of the poetic form. Mackay's poem is a Shakespearean sonnet. The structure of the Shakespearean sonnet is basically having 14 lines. The first 12 lines are usually divided into quatrains, in which a problem is established. The last stanza is a couplet, in which the problem is solved. The rhyme scheme is ABAB, CDCB, EFEF, GG. The pair rhyme in the last stanza emphasizes the last two lines due to its irregularity in comparison to the other alternate rhymes. In conclusion of the poetic form, the first 12 lines establish the problem of oppression. The illustrated solution in the last stanza is to determine unconditional combat against the oppressors. Language and imagery. The lyrical persona represents the battle with animal comparisons. On the one hand, they are the hunted and penned hawks, and on the other hand, they are the barking dogs, the monsters, and the evil peg. The language. The imagery of animal comparison also appear in the language. You can see that, for example, in line 1 and line 3. With the simile like hawks, it empathizes the pessimistic situation due to the lyrical persona and its relatives who are represented as a defenseless production animal. Or with the metaphor, the mad and hungry dog. It shows the superiority of the enemy due to their presentment as a wild carnivore. Moreover, in line 4, an alliteration appears, making the mock. It emphasizes the superiority as well as the evilness of the enemy. In line 5, there's an epiphora, if we must die or let us nobly die. This underlines the deadliness of the resistance. In line 11, an hyperbole appears, 1,000 blows. This exaggerates the violence of the enemy, but it is also a reference to the Red Summer, which I will explain on the next page. In line 12, a rhetorical question appears. What low before us lies the open grave? This emphasizes the hopeless situation. In line 4, we have a diction, accursed. This shows the elegance of the writer, Mackay. The analysis of the historical background. The occasion for Claude Mackay of creating the poem was the Red Summer. The Red Summer illustrates about 25 major anti-black white supremacist attacks and ensuing resistance of African Americans in the year 1919. The reasons for these attacks were social tensions after World War I. African Americans fought for the United States in World War I and therefore returned empowered after the war. But they still had to handle racism and segregation, especially in the South. Moreover, there was a recession of the economy. African Americans and European Americans, thus Americans with European ancestors, competed for jobs and housing in the United States. This also led to conflicts. In conclusion of the historical background, their lyrical persona and its relatives are represented as African Americans who resist to the white supremacist attacks and therefore political oppression. Let's move forward to the interpretation of the poem. For the interpretation, I will connect my individual findings of each analysis to a central meaning. After having connected all findings to a central meaning, it finally means the poem conveys the reader the feelings of oppressed people and moreover an appeal of encouragement for them to resist oppression with honor, even if the resistance has severe consequences. The relevance of the poem, for me personally, the poem has really high relevance because everybody has had contact with oppression in their lives, for example mobbing in school, and I think the appeal in the poem is really important, that you never give up fighting oppression. Generally, for today, I think the poem has also really high relevance. The poem is about racism in the USA, and nowadays, for example, the death of George Floyd provoked protests against racism. And that shows that racism is still active in the USA. And of course, not only in the USA, but also in other countries. And I think the message is timeless because there will always be oppression. These are my sources. They were of course not for analysis or interpretational matters. I hope you like my presentation. Thank you for your attention.